Don't call me Mom. You're not really mine. She said it like a correction, not a cruelty, like she was fixing my grammar in front of strangers. The room swallowed its laughter. I could hear the pianist miss a note and catch it, like a heartbeat skipping then pretending it hadn't. La Belle Maison glowed the way money glows, golden chandeliers, candles set in cut crystal, mirrors throwing soft light across white linen. Waiters moved like choreography in white gloves. The tablecloth had weight. The napkins were folded into swans, smiling at porcelain plates like even the fabric had better manners than me. I stood at the end of the Hamilton family table with a glass I hadn't wanted. My hand shook. The stem clicked against my ring. I had rehearsed a toast in my head all day, something small and decent for her 55th. A bracelet box sat in my purse. I imagined the look on her face if she let herself be kind. That vision snapped like dry spaghetti. Mrs. Hamilton looked at me the way some people look at a stain. "Lower your voice, Rachel," she added, loud enough for the tables around us to hear. Not angry, irritated, like I had embarrassed the wallpaper. Victoria laughed first. She always does. High and bright, a bell that cuts skin. "She's right," she said, lifting her champagne. "You are adopted. Don't make the staff uncomfortable." Her dress flashed under the candles, sequins catching every glance. She was the kind of beautiful people apologize to instinctively. She wore cruelty the way other women wear perfume, expensive, everywhere. Kenneth leaned back in his chair and twirled his fork. "We should have left her at home," he said, smiling at the table, not at me. "This dinner's for family." I could feel the word bruising me from the inside out. Family. The waiter beside me froze with the bottle of Barolo. He kept pouring into my mother's glass. No, into Mrs. Hamilton's glass. His face blank like the training manual told him it should be. My father, Mr. Hamilton, when my mouth refuses to lie, gave a low chuckle that meant, "Don't make a scene," then stared at his plate as if there was something urgent printed in the parsley. It wasn't the first time they'd done it. It was the first time they'd done it here, under chandeliers, beside windows that looked out over a city so pretend. The table stirred back to life, like a show that had paused for a commercial break. Conversations resumed in tidy loops. Victoria performed a story about brand deals and lighting. Kenneth complained about inept interns. My father made a soft joke about parking as if it were an enemy that needed to be dominated. I slid back into my chair, the last one, the edge seat, the one next to the place they'd set for coats, hands in my lap, cheeks burning hot enough to melt the butter curls. I tried to steady my breath. I focused on details so the room would stop tilting, the thin gold rim on the plates, the way the water in the tall glasses bent the candlelight, the pattern in the heavy rug that my heels had memorized. A waiter set down the foie gras. I wasn't hungry. I cut it anyway, tiny squares on the plate I suddenly hated. Victoria looked at the ring light of her phone and frowned. "You really wore that?" she asked me, voice sugar tart. "It washes you out." "Victoria," Mrs. Hamilton said mildly, as if this were the part where a director would say less, then turned to me with a solemn nod. "She's not wrong." I put down my fork before I dropped it. I wanted to leave. I wanted to vanish. I wanted to be less visible than the crumbs under the breadbasket. The pianist found his rhythm again, and the restaurant hummed along, the kind of elegant noise people pay for when they want to feel like nothing ugly exists. Dessert came, a tower of something glossy and extravagant that looked like it cost a small apology to the chef with its own gravity. Laughter rose, the kind that leaves no room for air. I breathed around it. I lifted my glass and set it down. The box in my bag pressed a small square against my hip like a bruise. The bill arrived with a soft ceremonial clink. The leather folder landed between Mrs. Hamilton and me. Before the waiter's hand left it, she slid it toward me without looking. The movement was practiced, elegant, fatal. "You've got a job now, don't you, Rachel?" she said, not unkindly. "You can cover this." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. My ears rang. The table went a fraction quieter, like it was listening for a punchline. I opened the folder. $3,270, gratuity not included. The chandelier heat crawled down the back of my neck. My hands were ice. I could feel the waiter's pity like a draft, and hated him for it, and loved him for it, which made me hate myself. I slid my card from my wallet. I almost didn't recognize it. Dull plastic, suddenly comic in a room that breathed gold. "Separate checks?" the waiter asked softly, a lifeline with white gloves. Mrs. Hamilton smiled. "One check," she said, eyes on mine. "She'll take care of it." The pen weighed as much as a mistake. I signed my name with a hand that wasn't working right. I wished the ink would scream. I wished the table would split. Instead, the receipt lay there obediently, proof that humiliation could be itemized. Chairs scraped. Coats appeared on shoulders. Perfume rose from the table like smoke, sweet and expensive. Victoria brushed past me, leaned in, and kissed the air near my cheek. "Thanks for dinner, Rach," she said. "You really shouldn't have." The perfume was citrus and something colder. I wanted to wipe it off my skin. Mr. Hamilton clapped my shoulder like I was a junior employee who had stayed late to fix a printer jam. "Good girl," he murmured, already looking past me to shake a friend's hand. Mrs. Hamilton didn't say goodbye. She gathered her shawl, stood, and took the room with her. I pressed my palms flat on the table until the wood told me it was real. My dessert fork reflected my face in a strip of metal, warped, small, ridiculous. I waited until the crowd that came with them moved as one toward the door, a flock of well-dressed birds. The pianist changed keys, and something inside me did too. I tucked the bracelet box deeper into my purse so I wouldn't be tempted to make another mistake. The waiter returned my card, eyes soft with apology he couldn't say out loud. "I'm sorry, miss." "It's okay," I told him, voice steadying into a register I barely recognized. "It's not your fault." He nodded and left me to the clink and murmur of other people's celebrations. I sat there a while longer with the empty glasses and the napkins that had the shape of mouths. My hands stopped shaking, then started again. I imagined standing up and flipping the table. I imagined slipping under. I laughed, and the sound surprised me. Not bright, not nice. Something scraped out of me that had edges. My breath turned white in the air and disappeared, then came back, then disappeared again. I watched it, like proof that my body still believed in survival. I turned to look through the restaurant window one last time. Our table was already reset. New linen, new glasses, a fresh curl of butter. Another party would sit there in 10 minutes and fill the space with easy happiness that belonged to them. The world was very good at erasing. I tightened my grip on my purse and felt the square of the bracelet box against my palm. I thought of giving it back to the store tomorrow, of telling the clerk it didn't fit, which would be true. I thought of bringing it to the river and throwing it in, which would be wasteful but more honest. A couple laughed behind me, the kind of laugh that doesn't ask permission. I stepped aside. My heels made blunt sounds on the marble. Every step felt like a decision I had not yet learned to name. At the curb, a car door slammed. Kenneth's voice floated across the valet stand, easy, amused, untouchable. I turned away from it like from a hot stove. My phone buzzed again. I let it. Somewhere in this city there were hands that would hold me if I asked, but I had no names to text. It would be me and the night until the night decided I had done enough. I took a breath that hurt going in and came out clean. I didn't have a speech. I didn't have a plan. I had a body that refused to fold and a face that was learning how not to apologize for existing. I started walking. The wind lifted the hair at the back of my neck and cooled the sting. The anger didn't roar. It settled. Heavy, cold, precise. A new kind of quiet started building in the space humiliation had emptied. It didn't feel like defeat. It felt like beginning. I sleep with the light on in that guest room, even now when I tell this. The Hamilton house is always quiet in the wrong way. Soft rugs that swallow footsteps, framed diplomas that watch me, a lemon-clean smell that makes me feel like I don't belong. I sit on the edge of the narrow bed, my knees pulled up, chin shaking against them. I press my forehead to the cold glass and stare at the trimmed hedges outside. I can hear the clink of cutlery far off. After my parents died, I learned silence is heavy. I learned to carry it like a backpack I couldn't take off. After the accident, I had no one. I say it plain because dressing it up doesn't help. The Hamiltons took me in. That's what the papers said. That's what I repeated to teachers when they asked. I said it like a fact that should be enough. I was grateful. I was scared. I felt like the new kid who never stops being new. I memorized the house rules. Don't leave shoes in the foyer. Don't touch Mr. Hamilton's record player. Smile at guests. Be grateful. Always be grateful. Gratitude looks different when it's handed to you like a leash. The first Christmas there, Victoria got a red bike with a bow the size of my head. She screamed and hugged everyone, pepper blooming in the air as if it clung to her bones. Mrs. Hamilton clapped. Mr. Hamilton took a photo. I got a stack of used books tied with twine. The covers were soft at the corners, the names on the inside crossed out in pencil. I ran my fingers over the dents and said, "Thank you." My cheeks burned. I tried to smile without showing all my teeth. Victoria pedaled circles in the driveway, ringing the bell. "Look at me!" she laughed. No one looked at me. I hugged the books tighter so they wouldn't shake. At meals, I sat at the long table and learned how to be furniture. The napkins were folded like birds. The plates were heavy. Conversation floated over me like music I didn't know. School trips, golf, theater tickets, Victoria's grades, always excellent. When I tried to add a sentence about my day, it slid off the table and crashed on the floor. Mrs. Hamilton put her hand on mine once and said, "Honey, be grateful you have a roof." It sounded sweet and thin, like a ribbon that cuts your skin if you pull too tight. I nodded. Yes. My hand trembled under hers. I pulled it back and wiped it on my skirt. I learned to eat fast so I could leave first. I learned to breathe through a straw because a full breath made me cry. When guests came, friends of the family, business people who said my name like they were tasting something sour, I handled plates and cleared glasses without being asked. "Rachel, dear, will you?" "Of course." "Good girl." I told myself my graduation day was bright and mean. The sun made everything look cheerful, like it was mocking me. I put on the gown and pinned the cap to my hair with shaking hands. I texted the family the time and the address a week before, then again that morning. I put my phone face down so I wouldn't watch it do nothing. My stomach knotted so tight I could taste metal. I sat in the row with my classmates and folded my fingers until the joints ached. "They'll come," I whispered. "They're busy." The names were called. People cheered, air horns, screaming, crying, flowers. I kept scanning the seats, trying to find our row, trying to find anyone who looked like they were looking for me. When they called my name, I stood. My knees wobbled. I walked across the stage and smiled at the dean like my face belonged to someone else. I looked out at hundreds of faces and found the spot I had saved in my head for them. Empty. "Not even a text," I said under my breath, and the words tasted like ash. The diploma folder slid into my hand, my fingers cramped around it. The world narrowed to a ring of sound, and then quiet. The quiet you get inside your own skull when something snaps. Even on the most important day, they still didn't see me. The sentence came out of me like a shout in a church. My throat burned, my eyes blurred hot. I didn't sob. I swallowed the sob and let it sit heavy beside my heart because crying in public felt like giving something away. I walked off the stage and down the steps, trembling so hard I could hear my tassel tapping my cheek. I didn't go home. I went to the one place that felt like it had doors open to me, Grandma Dorothy's small house at the end of Oak Street. She didn't share their last name, thank God. Her front yard smelled like lavender and damp earth. She opened the door before I knocked. "There you are," she said, not surprised, not offended, like I had just come from next door. I fell into her arms. Her sweater was soft and smelled like soap. My face pressed into her shoulder, and I finally took a full breath. My ribs ached with it. "No one came," I managed. She didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "they're busy." She said, "I know." Then, "Let's make tea." In her kitchen, everything had a place that made sense. The kettle hissed, the spoon clinked the cup. The world slowed. She sat me down and pushed the mug toward me. "Drink," she said. I didn't know how to hold that name like it mattered, but I wanted to try. Back at the Hamiltons, I moved quietly down the hall, passing oil portraits that seemed to glare at me. My room smelled like lemon polish and old panic. I took off the gown and hung it in the closet. It sagged on the hanger, as tired as I felt. I wiped under my eyes with the heel of my hand. I set the diploma folder on the desk and looked at it like it might bite. Then I sat on the floor and pulled my knees to my chest. I let the silence sit with me. But this time, I tried to be the one holding it, not the other way around. I made a promise to myself that night. Not out loud, not dramatic. My jaw ached with how hard I clenched it. "I'll stand up," I told the dark, with or without them. The words felt strange, like new shoes. I let them rub my heels raw. I said them again. "I'll stand up." The ceiling creaked. Somewhere in the house, someone laughed. I pictured Victoria's mouth curving in that practiced way that made adults melt. "You okay?" she would say if she remembered I existed. Then she'd walk past. I pressed my nails into my palms until half moons appeared. I wanted the marks to prove I was here. During the weeks after, I worked doubles at the cafe and studied at night. The espresso machine hissed in my ear until I heard it in my sleep. I made lattes with leaves, cleaned sugar off tables, smiled through a tight face. Regulars learned my name. "Thanks, Rachel." Those 2 words were medicine. When I got home late, the house was always bright like a showroom. Laughter rose from the living room. If I paused at the doorway, I could hear them talk about trips and contracts and Victoria's auditions. My name didn't come up unless they needed a ride covered or a table cleared. I learned how to move without being seen, like a ghost that still had to pay rent. Sometimes Mrs. Hamilton would stop me by the stairs, her hand soft on my arm, nails perfect. "Don't push yourself, honey," she'd say, as if that were kindness and not control. "You have a roof, you have food. Focus on being grateful." My stomach dropped like an elevator. "I am," I'd answer. My voice always sounded obedient when I said it. I hated that. My hand. On a Sunday, I paused in the hallway and stared at the family photo above the console table. The frame was gold and heavy. All of us were in it. If you didn't know, you would think I belonged. But there was a glare across my face from the way the picture was taken. A bright smear that cut me in half. It looked like I was fading. I reached up without thinking and touched the glass. My fingertips squeaked. My heart thumped hard enough that I felt it in my throat. I told myself I could live like this. Quiet, careful, invisible. I told myself I could be grateful forever if I had to. My mouth said the words. My body didn't believe them. My shoulders tightened, my breath went shallow. I stared harder at that white glare blocking my face, and heat rose in my neck. "I thought all I had to do was endure," I whispered to the empty hall. My voice was steady for once. My skin prickled like the air had shifted. I didn't know it then, standing there with my finger on the glass, but something small had started to move under the floorboards of my life. The kind of shift you only hear when the house goes quiet. I took my hand back and wiped it on my jeans. "Stay small," I told myself again, out of habit. The words felt wrong in my mouth, like they belonged to someone else. I glanced at the closed study door, the one I never opened, and felt a tremor run across my shoulders, light as a draft. I went upstairs. I shut my door. I leaned my head against it and exhaled until the tightness eased. "I thought I just had to survive," I said into the stillness. I didn't know the real storm hadn't even started. I always thought paperwork was boring until it started breathing. That afternoon looked harmless. Dust across the window, a lukewarm mug, a stack of folders I'd promised to sort. I told myself, just tidy up, like I was sweeping crumbs. I sat cross-legged on the rug, pulled a box closer, and the smell of old ink and dry glue pinched my nose. My fingers were cold, even though the room wasn't. I told my heart to relax. It didn't listen. I started with school forms, immunizations, course approvals, the harmless stuff. Then I found the scholarship packet from freshman year, the one I used to brag about to myself when no one else would. Proof I said it out loud to the empty room. Guardian account? The word felt clinical, polite, like a nurse smiling while she holds you down. Heat pulsed in my neck. I remembered the cashier windows, the long lines, me swiping my own card to pay tuition, feeling proud and grown. My belly went cold. But I paid, I whispered. I put the paper down, picked it up again. My hands trembled and creased the edge. I tried to steady my breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, but my chest jerked like a car in the wrong gear. Maybe it was a mistake. Paper has typos. People misfile things. I grabbed my phone before I could talk myself out of it. I found her name and pressed call. It rang twice. "Sweetheart," Mrs. Hamilton answered, warm frosting over steel. "Hi," I said, wishing my voice didn't squeak. "Quick question about my old scholarship. It says funds were dispersed to a Guardian account. Do you know what that means?" A soft laugh, rehearsed. "Oh, that. Yes, it's safer if we manage it for you." The room tilted. "Manage how?" "Banks do funny things with young people," she said. "We didn't want you to worry. We covered what you needed." I swallowed air and it scratched. "I paid tuition, with my job." "You helped," she cooed. "It built character." Silence spread and hummed. My palm was sweaty against the phone. "So the scholarship went to your account?" "To the Guardian account," she corrected, gentle but firm. "It's all the same family pot. Don't stress." My tongue tasted like metal. "Okay. Good girl." A click. The line died. "Good girl." I stared at my phone until the screen went black, my reflection shaky in it. My heart was beating hard enough to hurt. I put the phone face down and the room felt louder, like the house had started to breathe with me. I picked up the paper again. Dispersed to Guardian account. The words weren't moving. I was. I didn't sleep well that night. My brain kept organizing flashcards of little moments I'd ignored. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. A joke about our expenses. A tense silence when I asked about mail with my name on it. The laugh that followed was soft and expensive. My face went numb and then hot. I couldn't feel my legs. Trust. Not much left. I pictured a jar on a high shelf, hands dipping in and out while I washed dishes. I didn't say a word. I chewed a bite I couldn't taste. I smiled when someone told a story about theater seating. Inside, a door slammed so hard my teeth rattled. Not much left of what? I asked myself. Money that was theirs? Or mine? A few days later, an aunt, one of the nicer ones, the kind who likes gossip that sounds like concern, leaned toward me at a family lunch and asked, soft and bright, "Didn't your real parents leave you some money?" The word real hit like a slap. My fork almost slipped. I managed a laugh that scraped my throat. "I don't know." "Probably not." Her face flickered, like a TV with bad signal. Mrs. Hamilton's smile arrived sunny and precise. "We don't talk about such things at the table," she said. The subject dissolved on cue. My heart didn't. It pounded against my ribs so hard I felt bruised from the inside. That night I sat cross-legged again, laptop balanced on my knees, the room dark except for the screen. I typed search after search: guardianship law, scholarship disbursement, trustee duties, minor beneficiary rights. Each result opened into another. Definitions, clauses, case summaries, words I'd never cared about turned into blades: fiduciary, disclosure, accounting. The more I read, the more a shape formed in the dark. It had my name on it. It had their hands inside it. I opened my bank statements from those years. Tuition charges? There. My tips and paychecks? There. The math didn't sing, it screamed. If the scholarship covered tuition, I whispered, then what was I paying? The room was quiet in that sick way where quiet is a witness. I kept going. Adoption papers scanned into a PDF. I zoomed in and stared at signatures I've never cared to examine. Renewal letters from the scholarship fund. A notice about a Guardian account with bank routing numbers blacked out. I printed the pages my shaking fingers couldn't absorb on screen. The printer coughed them out, warm and smelling like promise and threat. I spread them on the floor like a cheap constellation and crawled from page to page on my knees. My palms left little sweat marks when I leaned. I traced the shape of a signature with my fingertip, slow, careful, and felt the shock hit. The loop on the H, the tilt of the letters, the triangular dot of every I. over and over the same hand that had smoothed my hair in public, the same hand that placed bills in front of me with a laugh, the same hand signing for me and around me and through me. I said it out loud before I could stop myself. They took it. My voice sounded lower, unfamiliar. They took my money. Anger rose fast, hot and dizzying. I wanted to throw something just to hear it break. My breath went shallow. My hands curled into fists until nails bit skin. I grabbed a page and nearly ripped it, then forced myself to lay it back down flat with shaking care. Think, I ordered myself. Don't just feel. Think I called the scholarship office the next day from behind the cafe, apron still on, the smell of espresso in my hair. "Hi," I said. "This is Rachel Adams. I had the Hamilton Memorial Scholarship years ago. I'm just confirming a detail for my records." My stomach knotted while I waited. A bored voice told me checks were issued to the Guardian account on file. "Can you confirm the payee name?" I asked, and my voice cracked on name. "I'm not authorized to share specifics," the voice said, but it was not the student. "Right," I said, swallowing something bitter. "Thank you." I ended the call and pressed my back to the brick wall, cool and rough. I put my hands over my face and laughed once, sharp. The world blurred at the edges for a while after that. I did the motions, pour, smile, wipe, ring up, but my head was a projector stuck on one scene. Their faces at dinner, the soft, sophisticated laugh, the word trust said like a joke. When I got home, I didn't engage. I moved past their conversation like wind under a door. In my room, I closed the lock quietly and laid the documents on the bed like a map out of a bad country. I circled dates. I underlined phrases. I took photos and made a folder labeled with something stupid like taxes so no one would open it. Every time I found another piece that fit, my body reacted. A little flinch, a small gasp, a new band tightening across my chest. Betrayal didn't explode. It seeped in, slow and sure until everything tasted like it. As the sun sank, my eyes burned. The laptop light made my skin look tired and older. I rubbed my temple with 2 fingers until the ache dulled. I kept coming back to the signatures. The curve of Mrs. Hamilton's name sat on line after line like a brand. I copied one, printed it, and held it in my shaking hands. "You didn't protect me," I said to the paper. "You protected your pot." A rage I didn't know I owned rose clean and bright. My chest flooded with heat. The words came out before I could tidy them. "You stole from me." I said it to the room, to the papers, to the ghosts of every dinner I'd spent swallowing thanks. My voice broke on the last word. I pressed the heel of my hand to my mouth until I felt my teeth. And then, because anger is a fire that eats oxygen fast, quiet fell. I set the paper down. I sat on the edge of the bed, hunched, elbows on knees, and stared at the floor until the carpet pattern swam. Tears found me without permission. Not many, just enough to sting my lips when I licked them away. My body was exhausted in that bone-deep way, like the day after a fever. I breathed. I listened to the house, waiting for it to knock back. My phone buzzed on the nightstand and startled me so hard my shoulder jumped. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and reached for it. The screen lit my room blue. One message. Grandma Dorothy. "Come see me." The wipers beat a slow rhythm I could feel in my throat. Rain crowded the windshield and blurred the world into gray, and I kept repeating the message in my head like a prayer I didn't understand. "Come see me tomorrow. It's important." My hands were tight on the wheel. My jaw hurt from clenching. I said, "Whatever it is, I can handle it. I have to." And my voice fogged the air with a thin, shaking cloud. Dorothy's little house sat at the end of the lane like it always had, modest, patient, lit from within. The rain eased as I pulled in, as if the sky was letting me take one full breath. I stepped out, and the cold bit my ankles. By the time I reached the porch, I smelled lavender and wet earth. She opened the door before I knocked. "There you are," she said, soft but thinner than before. "Are you okay?" I asked. My fingertips were numb. I couldn't stop rubbing them together. "I've been better." "Sit down, dear." She turned and I followed the shuffle of her slippers across the rug. The kettle already hummed. The whole house sounded like a lullaby. We sat at the small table. The quiet was so deep I could hear the rain ticking on the roof and the clock hesitating between seconds. She watched me the way only she does, like she's not afraid of what she'll see. I tried to swallow, but my mouth was dry. "You texted," I said. "You said it was important." "It is." Her hands, the hands that always smelled like soap and flour, trembled a little at the edges. She reached to the sideboard and pulled out a thick envelope tied with a red string. It looked old enough to have a heartbeat. She set it between us, and the table seemed to tip toward it. "It's time you know what they did," she said. My stomach dropped. I touched the string. It felt rough and real under my thumb. "What is it?" "Proof," she said, "and the truth." She untied the string. Paper slid out in a soft, dry whisper. She placed the first pages in front of me. Names, dates, my parents' names, my name. Numbers that felt like a language I never learned to speak. She lifted her chin, steady despite the tremble in her fingers. "Your parents left you a trust, $750,000. The room blinked. Air thinned. My hearing tunneled until the rain sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else's weather. I kept my eyes on the words, trying to force them to behave. Dorothy reached across and set her hand on my shoulder. The warmth of her palm met my skin like a rescue flare. They did. But now you know I grabbed the edge of the table because my knees trembled. My fingernails left little half-moons in my skin. I wanted to throw the papers and watch them burst like birds. But I couldn't move. I was nailed to the spot by the weight of those lines, those numbers, those signatures pretending to be care. My tears came hot and rude, sliding down before I could catch them. I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall and leave salt on my lips. I sank back into the chair with a thud. The kettle clicked off on its own. The room smelled of black tea and old wood and something new. Justice waking up. Dorothy slid a tissue across, and I took it because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. "You've always been their prey because you never knew your worth," she said. Her voice was weak, but every word found its place and sat there. "What do I do now?" I asked. My voice shook like it wanted to hide. "We do what's right," she said, quietly. She squeezed my fingers. Even her grip, gentle as it was, steadied me from the bones out. "Quietly," I repeated, because loud was all I knew in that moment. Loud pain, loud blood in my ears, loud memories of bills slid across tables and words like "be grateful" cut into pretty shapes. We sat there in the hush that follows a confession. I could feel my heartbeat starting to obey me again. I wiped my face and looked at the stack. My past boiled down to ink. It was awful, and it was beautiful because it was mine. The doorbell rang. Dorothy's eyes flicked to the hall. A crease opened between her brows. "They're here," she said, and her voice dropped low. The air changed temperature. "Who?" I heard the word and didn't recognize it as mine. Footsteps on the porch. A laugh I knew too well, light and polished. Kenneth's murmur, amused and oily. My stomach buckled. I stood without breathing and moved to the curtain that spilled down beside the doorway. The fabric brushed my wrist. My pulse drummed against it. The door opened. Mrs. Hamilton's perfume arrived first. Cool, expensive, the smell of a lie with perfect posture. "Dorothy," she said, sweetness lacquered over impatience. "We came to check on you. We heard Rachel was here." "I'm fine," Dorothy answered. She didn't bother to stand. "You should go." Kenneth's shoes squeaked once on the rug. His gaze slid across the room the way a thief's hand slides under a coat. He noticed the envelope before he noticed me. Of course he did. Mrs. Hamilton smiled the smile she uses to end debates at dinner. "You look pale," she said. "You shouldn't exhaust yourself with paper." She drifted one step toward the table, fingertips poised like a pianist's. My body moved before my doubt could. I stepped out from behind the curtain. My eyes were raw. My breath felt sharp. "It's not paper," I said. "It's proof." Her smile twitched, then found its face again. "You shouldn't fill her head with nonsense," she told Dorothy without looking away from me. "It's not nonsense," I said. My chest cracked open and something pure came out. "It's my money." The sentence landed in the room like a dropped plate, and everything in me wanted to flinch at the crash. Mrs. Hamilton blinked. Once. Slowly. Then she let out a small, bored laugh that made my fingers curl. "Be careful what you say, dear," she cooed. "Grateful girls don't bite the hand that feeds them." "I'm not biting," I said, surprised at how steady it sounded. "I'm naming what's mine." Dorothy turned her head and looked at Margaret with an expression of "Leave," Dorothy said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. She said it like a bell rings. Kenneth touched Mrs. Hamilton's sleeve. There was a flicker, calculation, vanity, something sour, and then she leaned back. "You'll regret this, Dorothy," she murmured, as if blessing the room. The door closed behind them with a simple click that felt like a stone dropped into deep water. I exhaled so hard my chest stung. My legs wobbled and I sat down fast. The table steadied my arms when they began to shake again. Dorothy's hand found mine. "Truth doesn't need to shout, dear," she said. "It only needs to stand." I looked at her and believed it because she was right there, upright, fragile and unmovable at the same time. My breathing evened. I gazed at the papers, at my parents' names, at my own, at the gravity of ink. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I could trust that wasn't packaged as a rule for me to obey. I slid the documents back into the envelope and wrapped the red string around them, twice, then a third time for good measure. I held the bundle against my chest until some of the shaking ran out of me and into it, like I could store the tremor for later. My voice came out small but clean. "They've stolen everything once," I said. "Not again." Dorothy smiled. It looked like a sunrise through fog. "Then we begin." I sat there with a weight of proof in my lap and the rain easing above us, and noticed something new. Fear had turned its face. I wasn't afraid of their power anymore. I was afraid of my own. I closed my eyes and let that feeling settle. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of them. I was afraid of what I'd do next. The house felt too quiet when I came back from Dorothy's. The kind of quiet that isn't peace, the kind that listens. I put my bag down and felt eyes I couldn't see. Doors murmured shut, footsteps softened, and the walls seemed to lean in. My phone kept buzzing on the counter like it had a fever. Unknown numbers, blank texts, a flood of pings with the same thin sound. I didn't answer any of them. I stood there and told myself to breathe. The air stuck in my chest like a stone. I tried to sleep and woke a dozen times with my heart punching me awake. In the gray hour before morning, I sat up and hugged my knees and whispered, "They won't stay quiet." They never do. The buzzing started again, a hive in my hand. I switched the phone to silent and held it anyway, because not looking made me feel blind. By sunrise, Dorothy called. "Have you seen the papers?" Her voice was calm, but I heard the warning tucked inside. "No," I said. My mouth went dry. "You will," she said. "Eat something first." I didn't. I walked to the corner store, bought the paper with trembling hands, and scanned the front page while the automatic door sighed behind me. There it was, like a slap you hear before it lands. Adopted daughter manipulates dying grandmother. My picture underneath. Me leaving Dorothy's porch in the rain, head down, shoulders up against the cold, made to look like I was hiding guilt instead of weather. I swallowed, and it scraped like sand. I told myself not to open the article. I opened it anyway. Phrases leapt out. Secret influence, vulnerable elder, family concerned. Every sentence bent around me like wire. By the time I reached home, my phone had found its voice again, though I hadn't given it permission. Hashtags bled down the screen. Hashtag gold digger Rachel. Hashtag ungrateful daughter. Hashtag trust fund thief. My name turned into a handle, and the handle turned into a weapon. Messages poured in from people who'd never know what my laugh sounded like. You parasite. Give it back. Hope you rot. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. I whispered to the empty room. They didn't even wait a day. Work was worse. Coworkers smiled with their mouths and not their eyes. When I got home, I turned off every lamp and let my apartment dim to a blue aquarium glow. I sat on the floor, back against the cold cabinet, and watched my phone light up and drown and light up again. My eyes hurt from not blinking. My breath came in small, scared pieces. I used to cry easily. That night, there was nothing left to spill. When they couldn't take anything else, I told the quiet, they took my name. I forced myself to stand. The mirror in the hallway met me with a face I hadn't seen before, sallow, smudged under the eyes, mouth held too tightly like it had been trained. Maybe they're right, I said to the girl in the glass. Maybe I should have stayed quiet. The phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. I told myself not to, and I answered anyway because fear is stupid that way. Silence. Then the softest breath, as if someone leaned close to my ear. A light chuckle, weightless and cruel. "Hello?" My voice cracked. The line went dead. I stood there listening to nothing, hearing everything. I closed the curtains with fingers that wouldn't obey me. The room shrank and my pulse got loud. I pressed my palms to the wall and tried to push it back where it belonged. In the morning, Dorothy called. Her voice was thinner than usual, but steady the way a beam is steady. Truth doesn't need a megaphone, sweetheart. It needs patience. I covered my eyes with one hand and let the words move through me. I don't think I have any left. You do, she said. They're loud because they're afraid. Let them make noise. You build truth quietly. Something in me unclenched a fraction. I stared at a sunspot on the floor and let the warmth touch my ankle. Quietly, I repeated. I tightened my grip on the phone until it hurt. Okay. I made an appointment to see the lawyer Dorothy trusted. His office smelled like old books and the kind of coffee no one actually drinks. He didn't flinch when I handed him the envelope with the red string. He didn't tilt his head at me like I was a case study. He flipped through the papers, lips pressed into a straight line that made me feel less crazy. We'll handle this properly, he said. Don't respond to their noise. I haven't, I said. My voice sounded. The louder they grew, the quieter I became. New articles multiplied like mold in corners I couldn't reach. Rachel hires lawyers to secure old woman's will. The words made me sound like a thief with a briefcase. There were quotes from faces I knew too well. Mrs. Hamilton's careful grief. We only wanted to protect her. Kenneth's shrug dressed as wisdom. She's angry because we didn't spoil her. Hearing them spin made my stomach twist, not with surprise, but with the insult of how predictable it was. I turned on the TV and there I was again, sliced into a segment between weather and sports. People who'd never met me sat on couches and debated my motives with buttery voices. She sounds entitled, one of them said. So much resentment, said another. It felt like listening to a eulogy for someone who hadn't died. I leaned forward until my forehead touched my knuckles and let out a low sound I didn't recognize as mine. They stole my childhood, I said to the empty room. Now they're stealing my name. Night came with rain. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and watched the water bead in my hairline. I looked into my own eyes, held the stare past the point of comfort, and felt something decisive move into the empty place where fear had been. My voice came quiet, but it didn't shake. Fine, I said. You want war? I'll give you one. The words didn't echo. They settled. I wiped the mirror with my palm and saw less fog and more of my face. Half of it looked tired. The other half looked like it had finally learned the language of its own bones. I gathered the copies I'd made, slid them into a folder, zipped it into my bag. I pulled on my coat. The zipper stuck once. I yanked it free. Outside, a thin rain stitched the air. The street smelled like wet concrete and possibility. I locked the door behind me and felt the click run up my spine like a vow. On the way back, my phone rattled in my pocket again, a constant insect. I let it. I didn't check it. My heart steadied to a new rhythm, the same beat from Dorothy's kitchen when she said patience, the same beat from the lawyer's office when he said properly. The noise was still out there, shrill and bright. Inside, a steady drum began to drown it out. At home, I laid everything in order on the table. Dates, names, signatures, small towers of proof. The courthouse steps felt like a throat I had to climb. Reporters crowded the walkway, elbows sharp, voices hard with sugar. Questions hit me like pebbles. Did you manipulate your grandmother? Are you fighting for money or the name? I didn't answer. I kept my breath in a tight coil and held Dorothy's envelope under my arm like a rib. My fingers had gone numb even though the morning was already warm. I told myself, in. Out, I watched my chest obey. Across the street, the Hamiltons arrived like a magazine spread that blinked. Perfect coats, perfect hair, perfect sorrow. Margaret's smile had the same practiced mercy it always did, the kind that slices while it kisses. Kenneth's jaw set in that easy, bored way that once made waiters hurry. They stood together and looked like the word respectable. It scraped my throat. They came to perform, I told myself. I came to tell the truth. Inside, the air cooled to judgment. I felt it on my scalp. Benches creaked as people settled. The judge's bench loomed blank and patient. I sat at the table with Dorothy's lawyer and folded my hands so tightly the bones pressed white. My heart tried to bolt. I pressed my palm over it and caged it in. Across from me, Margaret met my eyes and let a thin smile rise, just enough to say what she didn't dare say out loud. I breathed through it. I stared at a knot in the wood grain until my gaze steadied. The judge entered. We rose. The scrape of everyone's shoes sounded like a wave pulling back. We sat again. The Hamiltons' attorney stood with that slick kind of calm I've only seen in men who've never begged for anything. "This is not about money," he began, voice smooth as a wiped countertop. "It's about betrayal. My clients raised her, loved her, and she exploited their kindness." My stomach pulled tight like a bad knot. He let that sink into the room and then gestured toward Margaret. They managed her finances for safety. Right on cue, Margaret dabbed at the corner of one eye with a handkerchief. "We only wanted to protect her," she said, trembling perfectly. Pens scratched. Heads tilted toward the spectacle of soft grief. I tightened my grip on my pen until the cap snapped, a tiny sound that felt like a confession. I set the piece. "I thought it was love," I answered. Later, I learned it was my money paying for it. A rush of whispers skimmed the room. He lifted one eyebrow as if I were an amusing child. "Do you have proof of that accusation?" I held his stare. "Yes, and you're holding it in your hand." He glanced at the folder on his table, the one we'd provided during discovery, and smoothed the cover like he was petting a cat. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We'll get to that." My lawyer stood slowly. He never rushed. He made the room come to him. He slid a binder forward and opened it with careful fingers. "We'll get to it now," he said. "Exhibit A, trust fund withdrawals. Exhibit B, guardian account disbursements. Exhibit C, signatures on file." He passed copies up to the judge and across to the other table. Paper whispered between hands. My pulse rose into my throat and perched there. My lawyer continued, voice even. "These signatures have been compared against known samples and verified by independent experts." He rested his finger on the neat loop of an H. "They belong to Margaret Hamilton." A breath was held by the entire room in the same second. Kenneth looked down like his tie had turned offensive. Margaret's hand gripped the arm of her chair so hard her knuckles went pale, then released, then smoothed her skirt. She found her composure like a dropped glove and slid it back on. For years, I thought, I begged for their approval. Now, I just want their lies to stop breathing. The attorney cleared his throat and pivoted. "Miss Adams," he said, Isn't it true you maintain a close relationship with Dorothy, who recently altered her estate plan?" I felt the small flare of anger, clean as alcohol. "I have a relationship with the only person who never asked me to be grateful for things that were already mine." A few people coughed to hide their surprise. The judge watched me over his glasses, face unreadable, hands folded. The Hamiltons' attorney switched to something softer, the tone you use when you lead a witness into a trap. "And you've spent a significant amount of time with Dorothy recently?" "Yes," I said. "Talking about wills?" "Talking about truth," I said. "Talking about—"
When it was done, the attorney across the aisle sprang to his feet with the show of disapproval so polished it squeaked. "With respect," he said, meaning everything but respect, "this young woman is confused. She misinterprets assistance as theft." Margaret lowered her head. The room tilted toward her. Then she broke, or pretended to. She covered her face and sobbed into the neat white square of cloth. "I loved her like my own," she cried. "If this is how she repays us, then I've failed as a mother." Pens scribbled with hunger. Cameras clicked their tiny teeth. My lungs forgot their purpose. I stared at the wood of the table until the lines blurred. Something inside me lifted its head. Not rage, not even grief, just a clear, tired thing that had run out of places to hide. I looked up. My voice came out low and steady. "A mother doesn't steal her child's future and call it love." The words landed like a stone dropped into the deep end. The ripples moved through the benches and then vanished under the surface. The judge's gaze shifted from the paper stack to me. His chin tipped a fraction. Nothing official, just enough to let me know he'd heard human words in a room that often forgets them. The courtroom door opened from the back with a soft groan. I didn't turn. I felt the hush before I knew why. A cane tapped, a careful step. Breath caught around me like lace snagging on a nail. "Keep your head up," Dorothy whispered when she reached me, and the sound slid directly into my spine and straightened it. She took the witness chair with help, each motion deliberate. Her hands shook a little when she raised them to swear, then stilled when she folded them. My lawyer stood closer, gentler now. "Mrs. Dorothy," he said, "in your understanding, who is the rightful heir of the Adams Trust?" Dorothy looked at the Hamiltons and then at me. Her eyes softened. Her voice didn't. "My granddaughter, Rachel. She is the only one I trust." The room pinched in, then opened. I lowered my head. One tear escaped and traveled the slow road to my jaw. My mouth curved without permission. It wasn't joy, it was recognition. "Why?" my lawyer asked. Dorothy held up a page. When the judge recessed for the day, the wood gavel touched its base with a sound that felt like permission to breathe. We stood. I gathered my things, with fingers finally beginning to behave. The hallway outside exploded with voices, but the heavy door kept them temporary. I walked out into the spill of afternoon and stopped just beyond the threshold. Reporters surged, microphones like spear tips, the same questions sharpened into new angles. I said nothing. Silence cloaked me better than any statement. Dorothy's hand found mine. Her skin was thin and warm. She squeezed once, the way you close a promise. "It's not over yet, sweetheart," she said, voice worn but unshaken. "I know," I answered. My mouth felt dry. My feet felt rooted. I looked back at the courthouse, at the stone that had heard me say mother and not swallowed me whole. For the first time, the truth stood taller than their lies. I could feel it, not as triumph, but as gravity. It held. I stepped down one stair, then another. The noise swelled and slid off me. My heartbeat steadied to a pace I recognized. I squeezed Dorothy's fingers and kept my eyes forward. I knew they wouldn't fall quietly. The morning felt staged, too gentle, like it didn't know my name. I poured coffee and watched the steam rise, hands a little unsteady, forehead tight from not sleeping. The TV mumbled in the background until a bright voice said the words that snapped my spine straight. "An exclusive live interview with Victoria Hamilton." I froze with the kettle midair. My heart sped up, quick and mean. I set the kettle down too hard and the cup rattled. "Of course," I said to the empty kitchen. They couldn't stand being quiet. I should have turned the TV off. I didn't. I carried the cup to the couch, wrapped both hands around it to stop the shaking, and listened to the countdown music I'd heard 1,000 times before big, shiny lies. My chest felt like a fist. I tried to breathe in fours the way Dorothy taught me. Inhale, hold, exhale, rest. But the air kept snagging in my throat. The show opened with the host's soft smile and a tone made of velvet. The set gleamed. Victoria sat there in a white dress, all light and innocence, her hair pulling itself into sympathy. Kenneth beside.
My teeth met too hard. "Attention," I whispered. "You stole my life." The words scratched on the way out. I took a sip and gagged on cold coffee. Victoria started to read the script. I know that sound, the tone people use when the truth is too dangerous and they've practiced a safer lie in the mirror. We took care of her. We guided her. And she turned on us for money. Her lashes fluttered. She dabbed the corner of one eye. "Do you think she planned this?" the host asked, gentle, nudging the ball right where they wanted it. "Yes," Victoria said, barely looking at the camera. "She used Grandma Dorothy's kindness to rewrite history." I stood up without realizing it. My body wanted distance from the couch, the cup, the air itself. My pulse pounded in my ears so loud I could hear nothing else for a second. Then the studio noise slid back in, the audience's tight hum, the host's buttery prompts, the rustle of cards. I pressed my palm to the wall to steady myself. They'd stolen everything, I told my apartment. Now they're stealing the truth. Then a woman in the audience stood with a microphone and asked the kind of question that cuts through perfume. "So you didn't use any of Rachel's inheritance?" Victoria's laugh was small and wrong. There was never any inheritance. The host glanced down, touched a paper, and lifted his eyebrows. "But according to court documents, the Adams Trust existed before your guardianship." Kenneth's voice slid in, smug and fast. "That's a misunderstanding. We only managed it." Victoria flicked her eyes toward him, just a quick, nervous glance, and I saw it. The tiny crack that starts in the corner of a mask and spreads like lightning. The host caught the scent of blood. "Did you or your family ever spend money from that trust?" His tone lost its silk. It picked up steel. Victoria's mouth twitched. Her shoulders lifted. She breathed in through her nose and tried to smile. The audience leaned toward her like wheat in a gust. Kenneth's fingers tightly around the chair arms. I could see the tendons in his hand. "Yes or no, Miss Hamilton?" the host asked. Silence stretched until it hurt. Then it snapped. Victoria leapt to her feet. Her voice shot up an octave and shattered. "Yes, we used her money. So what? She should be But the correction was already dead. The sentence was a body on the floor. I stood in my living room and watched the replay come in slow motion. Yes, we used her money. Over and over, like a clock striking. Each time it hit, something uncoiled inside my chest, tightness easing, not joy, not gloating. Relief with exhausted knees. I didn't cheer, I didn't clap. I just put my cup down carefully, like it might break the spell, and sat. My hands lay in my lap, palms up, fingers still shaking but quieter. The TV kept showing faces, shocked, thrilled, hungry. Producers rushed the stage. The host threw to a break, voice tripping, eyes wide. The screen flattened into a logo and music tried to fill the hole the truth had blown open. The apartment felt bigger and emptier at the same time. My throat burned, my eyes stung. I let them. Tears slid warm and honest down my face. My shoulders slumped and then lifted with the kind of breath you take when a weight gets removed, but your body doesn't trust it yet. It wasn't revenge, I said into the quiet. It was release. I thought of Dorothy's hands wrapped around a teacup. I imagined her somewhere with the TV on, not smiling, not crowing, just breathing steady the way she taught me. I said, softer, "You see, Dorothy? Truth fights for itself.
My phone buzzed non-stop against the table, a small animal trying to get out. I didn't touch it. The hashtags would be growing branches and thorns. People I didn't know would be adding their little slices of opinion like stickers on a wall. I didn't want their sound. I wanted the quiet that follows the first real word spoken in a long time. I stood and walked to the sink, ran the tap until the water went cold and splashed my face. The salt tasted like it belonged. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, eyes red, cheeks blotchy, mouth not hard anymore. I waited for pride, for glee, for that sharp, vindictive heat I'd always been warned about. It didn't come. Just a tenderness I didn't expect for the girl staring back at me. The girl who had begged doors to open by being small. The girl who had said thank you with stolen money in her pocket that wasn't hers yet. I touched the glass with 2 fingers.
I sank into the chair with my legs tucked up and wrapped my hands around the now lukewarm cup. The porcelain warmed slowly against my palms. I closed my eyes and let new air in, long and deep and kind. My shoulders dropped the last inch of armor. I thought of every dinner where I swallowed words to keep the peace and felt them finally dissolve in my throat. The phone kept trembling, urgent and bright. I let it dance. I didn't need it to tell me anything I didn't already know. The truth had spoken without asking my permission, and for once, I didn't have to push it uphill. "I'm not angry," I whispered, surprised to hear it and mean it. "I'm tired, and I'm done begging." The cup knocked gently when I set it down. My hands had stopped shaking. I walked to the window and opened the blinds. Daylight moved across the floor toward me like something faithful. I watched dust soften in the beam and felt my ribcage shift to make room for breath. The city made its usual noise, far away and harmless. I didn't smile big. It wasn't that kind of day. I let a small one find its way. Not triumph, not spite, just something quiet that knew. For the first time, the world saw them the way I always had. The TV flashed the clip again. I reached for the remote and turned the screen black. Silence rose up and settled like a blanket that finally belonged to me. I stood there for a long minute, both hands on the sill, forehead cool against the glass, and listened to my own breathing. I didn't plan the next move. I didn't rehearse a statement. I didn't write a post. I just let the truth stand, steady as a pillar, without my body holding it up. Somewhere the kettle clicked off by itself. I wiped my cheeks with my sleeve and laughed once under my breath, small, surprised, almost free. The morning tasted like metal. I stood outside the courthouse gate and felt the air press on my chest the way hands do when they mean to steady you but only make it worse. Reporters swarmed, microphones rising like thorns, questions landing hard. "Are you ready for the verdict? Do you believe in justice today?" I didn't answer. I pressed 2 fingers to the tendon in my neck and felt it jump under my skin. "I'm not here for revenge," I told myself. "I'm here for peace." The words were... We rose for the judge. We sat. Paper slid. Time stretched. When my lawyer stood, my breath changed shape. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. He held up the page that had already torn a hole through weeks of noise. The transcript of that live sentence. "Yes, we used her money. So what?" Hearing it in the hush of a courtroom did something different to me than hearing it at home. At home, it unlocked air. Here, it pinned a lie to the wall and made it stop moving. The room absorbed the words and went still. My lawyer closed the folder with a soft click. "No further questions, Your Honor." The truth speaks for itself. The Hamiltons' attorney tried to pour water on a fire that had already burned the house down. "It was an emotional statement," he said, "taken out of context." The judge didn't blink. Context doesn't change confession. A tiny, unkind part of me wanted to smile. I swallowed it. My eyes found Margaret's. For a moment, I saw what I used to want from her, the soft praise, the hand on my shoulder, the sense that my existence could be a blessing if I stayed quiet enough. It all looked small now, like furniture from a childhood bedroom you can't believe once filled a house. I spoke so only my row could hear. "You took everything, but not my truth." Her expression didn't break. It emptied, and that hurt worse than rage would have.
Then the judge stood, robe falling straight, voice carrying without effort. Based on the evidence and testimony, the court hereby rules in favor of Miss Rachel Adams. He did not look at me when he said my name. I didn't need him to. The Adams Trust Fund will be fully reinstated to her name. I tasted salt and wasn't sure if it was tears or the aftertaste of fear leaving. Furthermore, Mr. Kenneth Hamilton will be investigated for financial fraud. The gavel touched wood. 3 sharp beats. They sounded like a door closing with love. Gasps. A few curses bitten off. Chairs scraped. I didn't move. I closed my eyes and exhaled from somewhere deeper than lungs. 1 tear fell. I let it. It wasn't pain. It was something like the first deep breath after a fever breaks. Noise rose like heat. Victoria jolted up, hands flying. "This isn't fair!
I am." Her eyes flicked, confused. "Because losing you taught me how to stand." I turned before she could answer and felt something heavy climb off my shoulders and sit somewhere else in the room that was not mine anymore. Outside, the noon sky was bright and unafraid. Reporters swelled into a shape that wanted to swallow me, and I let the tide carry me 3 steps before I found my heels and planted them. "Rachel, how do you feel? Do you forgive them? Will you sue for damages?" I lifted my chin. My voice didn't shake. The truth was the only thing I wanted back. Then I walked. Not fast, not slow. I walked like a person who finally knew where her feet belong. The day broke into pieces after that. I remember doors sliding, hands reaching, corridors smelling like paper and coffee. I remember signing something that said I could sign for myself. I remember a clerk saying, "Congratulations," like it was a word that fit, and me nodding because it was the best she had. Someone told me Kenneth had been taken aside. Someone told me contracts that used to love Victoria had fallen out of love overnight. Someone showed me a feed full of logos making distance. I didn't scroll. I didn't need to see 100 strangers discover a backbone on my behalf. The world was rearranging itself, and it didn't require my help. Later, the house that once belonged to my nightmares appeared in my mind as if I were turning the knob. Ropes across rooms. Boxes with numbers where vases used to be. A curtain breathing on an empty window. Silence as loud as chandeliers. Not triumph. Absence. The kind you can hear when you finally put your ear to it. I went to Dorothy's as the light began to mellow. The hallway smelled like lavender and soap the way it always had. She lay propped against pillows, thin and bright. I took her hand and felt the soft paper of her skin and the stubborn pulse beneath. "It's over, sweetheart," she said. "No," I answered, and the word surprised me with how steady it sounded. "It's beginning." She nodded like I'd finally passed a test I didn't know I'd been taking. "Good," she said. "Then you finally understand what strength is." I think I do. Evening waited outside as if it had been saving a place for me. I stood on the doorstep and let the air touch my face. The street wore the soft gold that makes old things look kind. Somewhere a dog barked twice and stopped. The world didn't cheer. It didn't have to. It had steadied. I stepped down and paused at the sidewalk. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with messages I hadn't earned and apologies I didn't need. I left it there. I wanted the quiet to finish its sentence. I looked down the road I'd walked 1,000 times and felt the strangest thing. The road looked back. It didn't judge. It didn't promise. It waited. "Justice gave me my name back," I said to the air. The words felt right in my mouth. Truth gave me peace. I swallowed. My jaw softened. But I'm not done. I didn't add the rest. I let the sentence hang between the trees and me, unfinished on purpose. I took one step, then another. The day exhaled and I went with it, lighter by exactly the weight I'd been carrying. Spring smelled like rain and new paint the day I unlocked the front doors. The brass plate on the wall read, "The Evelyn Foundation," and I traced the letters with my fingertips as if I were learning a new alphabet.
Inside, children's voices wakened in the corridor, feet thumping, a laugh that popped like a bubble, a whisper that turned into a shout. For a second, my legs went weak. I wasn't the girl walking into someone else's house anymore. I was walking into mine. "Morning, Miss Adams," someone called. "Just Rachel, please," I said, and it came out easy. Sun slid across the lobby floor. I passed the photo of Dorothy we'd hung by the office, her smile soft, a sprig of lavender in her hands. I touched the frame lightly and felt my throat tighten the way it does when joy collides with loss. I said, "Hi, Grandma," under my breath and moved on. In the playroom, a boy built a lopsided tower and said he'd make it taller than the sky. I told him, "You will," and meant it. I checked the supply closet, the intake desk, the donation books. My mind wanted excuses to keep walking because my heart was pressing at the inside of my ribs, asking to be heard. I stopped at the little sign we'd put over the entrance. I made it through the morning on small tasks, paperwork and Band-Aids and answering the doorbell with a smile that belonged to me. At lunch, I stood by the window and watched the street. City noise softened at this height. I cupped my tea and said to myself, "You're allowed to let it be good." It startled me how foreign that permission sounded, and how quickly my body wanted to accept it. After we closed for the day, I went home and pulled open the bottom drawer of the old chest in my bedroom. Dorothy's scent rose up, lavender and paper and a hint of the soap she liked. Tucked beneath a folded scarf was the envelope I hadn't been ready to open until now. On the front, in her thin, steady script, "For when the house feels quiet again." The house felt quiet. I sat at the table and slit the envelope with my thumb. The paper whispered like a friend clearing her throat. "My dear girl, you are not my blood, but you are my heart. You've carried pain with grace and turned loss into purpose. Don't live to prove them wrong. Live to make love louder than hate." I read it, and the words didn't just sit in my eyes. They walked into my chest and took a seat. I pressed the letter to my sternum and felt my pulse knock against it as if it were saying yes. Tears came the way rain comes on a warm day, soft, steady, no anger in it. "I hope you're proud of me, Grandma," I whispered. The room didn't answer. It didn't need to. Later, as the light thinned, I drove to the cemetery with a small bouquet of lavender and our favorite photo, the one where she pretended not to notice I'd stolen her cardigan. The grass was damp and forgiving. I knelt and wiped a leaf from the stone. The carving was simple. Dorothy Hamilton, the woman who chose love over blood. "You gave me family when I didn't have one," I said. My breath fogged and disappeared. "And I'll keep giving that to others. That's my promise." A breeze moved across my face like a hand. My chest eased. I placed the photo at the base of the stone, tucked the stems where they wouldn't blow away, and sat with her in the kind of silence that feels like conversation. When I left, I walked backward for 2 steps, as if I could hold on a moment longer, and then I turned and carried the quiet with. One afternoon, I sat at my desk as light spilled over a stack of intake forms. The pen felt balanced in my hand. I pulled a blank sheet of paper toward me and began to write in a slow, careful hand. "To the Hamiltons, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. You no longer define my story. I do." I signed my name. I left the page there and pretended to fold it into an envelope. I didn't send it. I didn't need it to arrive anywhere to be true. I slipped it into a box with a rubber band around old receipts and a birthday card from a year that wasn't good. I closed the lid. My lungs opened wider. "Miss Rachel!" a small voice called from the hall. I looked up as a girl barreled in with a grin too big for her face and a paper clutched in both hands. Her hair stuck out in a brave halo. "I finished the drawing," she said, breathless. "Let me see." I crouched. She held it up. A house with a flag, a wide sun with long lines, and a woman standing in the middle with her arms open. "Who's that?" I asked. "You," she said, like it was obvious. "I want to be like you when I grow up." My throat closed. I swallowed until it opened again. My hand found the top of her head and smoothed a curl that refused to lie flat. "Be better," I said. She giggled, pleased with the assignment, and ran back down the hall, her sneakers squeaking on polished floor. I stood slowly and pressed my palm against the drawing's outline on the table, as if I could feel the warmth of the crayon through the thin paper. A small laugh slipped out of me and stayed in the room like good weather. In the evening, I locked the front doors and stepped into the courtyard. The flag lifted and fell in an easy rhythm. The air was clean and kind. I tilted my face upward and let a full breath stretch me from inside. I thought about everything they'd taken: money, time, the right to speak without permission. They had carved rooms out of my name and charged me rent. That was over. The house I stood in front of didn't ask me to whisper thank you. It invited me to say yes. They took my trust, my name, my place, I said, testing the words for weight. The sentence balanced in my mouth, neither bitter nor sweet. But they could never
At home, I propped Dorothy's letter on the dresser where the morning light would find it. I turned off every noise and walked from room to room as if I were meeting them again after a long absence. The chair by the window, the chipped mug that made coffee taste like something earned, the plant that kept leaning toward the sun no matter where I set it down. My hand brushed each thing without urgency, and a quiet certainty followed behind me like a shadow I didn't have to outrun. Before bed, I stood in the doorway and looked at the shape of my life, modest, practiced, belonging to me. My chest rose and fell just once, with the kind of breath that has no drama in it. I lay down and let the dark arrive without arguing with it. Sleep came not as an escape, but as a gift I didn't have to deserve. In the time that followed, there were still bills and broken printers, and a child who cried until she didn't, then cried again. There were mornings I woke up with my jaw tight and had to remind it to release. There were hours I missed a voice I couldn't call. But the spine of my days stayed straight. The windows stayed open. The work kept making a small, clear sound, like a spoon tapping glass. I learned to love that sound. When people ask me now what family means, I don't try to make it pretty. I say it's a place you can knock on and the door opens from the inside. I say it's a promise kept even when no one is writing it down. I say it's the courage to build a table and the humility to leave a chair empty until the right person needs to sit.
Tonight, after the lights went out and the building hummed itself to sleep, I stood in the courtyard once more. The flag lifted, the sky held. I put my hand on my heart and felt a calm, deliberate beat. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was proof. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who stays when everyone else leaves. If you've ever felt like Rachel, comment below and tell me, what would you have done?